Hello, friends. Welcome to today's webinar in June. Today is a webinar about reading aloud and why reading aloud with your kids changes everything. Who am I? I'm Julie Bogart. Maybe you've heard of me. I started a company called Brave Writer. Behind me are my books. Help, My Kid Hates Writing, my new one. I hope that you're all reading it. So if you really want to understand, like, how does Brave Writer think about writing? How do I transform my paradigm, shift my worldview around writing? Please read this book. And then you are going to find that our program is like magic because our program actually implements this philosophy. See what I mean? So I hope that you get it. There is an audio version. I read it, and it's really up to you. Some people really enjoy listening. Like you just put in your earbuds, you wash dishes, go for your walk, you hear my voice. It's like listening to a podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to take notes and put tabs in a book, then obviously audio won't work for you. But I'm telling you right now, this book is really going to help you if you are struggling with writing, and it's going to tell you why the programs you've used so far are ineffective because the school system for writing doesn't work. And we know that because we've been doing this for 25 years. I come from a professional writing background. My mother was sorry, she died this year. So when I say that, the word was feels very strange to me. In any case, she wrote over 70 books. She has sold over 2 million copies. I grew up under her wing. I learned how to write from the world of professional writing, where the writing instruction is about preparing you so that people want to pay for your writing, not grade it, but pay for it. And the strategies that we use in the world of professional writing, which is what I did before Brave Writer, I was a freelance writer, a ghost writer, a magazine editor, all that kind of stuff. Those strategies that we use when we're training people for professional writing are surprisingly effective with children. And because I homeschooled my 5 kids and worked with hundreds of thousands of families, we have now devised a beautiful intersection between education and professional writing instruction to create a completely different approach that I promise you works. So if there's anything that you're looking for, we have it. Now, people are asking, is there more in this book than our curriculum called Growing Brave Writers? This book is a book. It's the kind of book that you read when you want to understand something at a more fundamental level. It's got lots of stories, lots of analogies, and it sort of takes the philosophy and expands it. Growing Brave Writers implements the philosophy. It's got coaching material. There is plenty in there to help you, but then it also gives you the activities to do with your kids, right? The actual programmatic activities, helping you understand what you are accomplishing with each one. So they're both really important, and I highly recommend them both. Now, I didn't mean to start with an ad, but so many people keep asking me questions in chat. I just wanted to say, listen, I wrote a book to answer them. Okay. The other books that I've written are The Brave Learner, which is for people who are new to homeschooling or have been in it a while, but really want to embrace a more life-giving, delight-directed, natural style of learning that is built from brain research. And then, of course, Raising Critical Thinkers, which is the book that for me is like the magnum opus of all the work I've done for the last 30 years at a moment in time when artificial intelligence is trying to rob us of our critical thinking skills. Now, I will say I was an early fan of AI. I am currently a little troubled by where it's going. So we are staying alert and we are going to use our critical thinking brains to manage the impact as it is unfolding in real time. Which brings me to today's topic, reading aloud. Now, I had prepared a webinar and then I rewrote the whole thing. Here's why. I was going to tell you all the things I always tell people about reading aloud that I believe in that will be a part of this webinar. But something unusual occurred in my life this week. So I'm going to read you what I wrote because I did not yet prepare and memorize. This is like pouring out of me from today. Okay. So are we ready? Here we go. So here's what happened. How many of you know Emily Henry, the romance writer, fiction writer, beach read writer? How many of you know her, Emily Henry? How many of you have read any of her books? Like she is, you know, just going wild right now. Reese Witherspoon just picked her most recent book as part of her book club. Yes. Okay. So something you may not know. Emily Henry is from here in Westchester. She ran in the same friend group circles as my daughter, Johanna. When I first saw her name on a book, I was like, wait, is that our Emily Henry? And Johanna's like, yeah, isn't that wild? And I was like, okay, that means I got to read these books, like I've got to. So I started with Book Lovers, which was delightful. I was instantly charmed by her writing style. She has a very beautiful writing style. She writes for adults. But I just finished her newest novel, Great Big Beautiful Life, and I finished it today. And I ugly cried for 20 minutes. Simultaneous to that ugly crying, some of you may or may not know, I lived in Morocco when I was young, newly married. I am no longer married to that husband, but John is his name, the father of my kids, the man who was a part of our homeschool, our literature growth. He was all partnered up with me about writing. He taught writing composition at colleges. We sadly divorced, but we have stayed friends. And he is now in Morocco sending me these photos of places we lived. And I was taken back in time to when I used to live there. And what I used to do when I lived in Morocco, when I was young, in my 20s, early 20s, I moved there when I was 23. I would climb the stairs to the roof in the afternoons, get out my denim covered journal with a pen. And the pen I used was a fountain pen because, romantic writer. And I would write down in as much detail as I could muster everything that was overwhelming and overloading my senses, from the smell of the scent of the spices, the way it felt to stand in a chicken stand. I remember this one time I was pregnant with Noah. I was standing in this stall and it was super hot. I'm in a dress, I'm completely sweating, and I'm there to buy a chicken. Now, in America, at that time in the 1980s, you could go to a supermarket and buy a chicken plastic wrapped in a supermarket. Where I lived, you went to a stall where there were live chickens. You pointed to one, they wring its neck, they threw it in a defeathering machine, they took it out, they ripped out its guts, and they threw it in a bag and handed it to you. The first time that happened, I cried because, well, I was unfamiliar. I don't know what I thought was in the supermarket, but I certainly didn't know it was that. But on this one occasion, I literally passed out. And when I came to, there was a woman rubbing an onion under my nose and another woman shoving dirty mint leaves in my mouth and another woman in my ear saying, I have your money, don't worry. They brought me to my feet. I was, 7 months pregnant. And they gave me my chicken. And the woman said, I'll walk you home. And I started to tell her where I lived. And she said, we all know where you live. I was the only American living in this entire apartment community. And they walked me home. And I recovered and then wrote it all down in absolute detail as a way to manage this overwhelming experience of being human in a place that was still becoming familiar, right? Like I had gone to that chicken stand many times, but passing out was a whole other level, right? This whole experience was overwhelming. And what I realized after reading Emily's book and then these text messages coming from my husband, ex-husband simultaneously, this memory, this feeling of how important it is to take our human experiences and put them into meaningful language, it overwhelmed me. I just started seeing like why we read aloud in a whole other way, not just for education, not just so they'll learn grammar, not just because this is what you do with children. I was spending my years in Morocco. We had no TV. The internet didn't exist yet. I had no telephone. I had no friends living near me. But my husband, the lit guy, mailed 200 books to Morocco so we'd have something to do. And all I did was read and write for my years in that country. They fed each other like a stream feeding a larger river, making its way to the ocean. I was becoming human. I was forming a moral imagination. I was mirroring to myself my experiences by lingering with them and naming them, and then looking through the window of another writer who is going through their own dislocation, displacement, self understanding, self observation journey. Like, if you just think about every book you read, is like going to another country. You're going to the country, the ocean, the island, the continent of this other person's landscape, their internal world, the way they think. And by going there, you have two opportunities. One, to reflect on the similarities and correspondences so you feel less alone. Like, I do have a great, big, beautiful life too. I too have tragedy and trauma. I too have the love of my life. I too have deep bonding with a child. I too have alienation from people I counted on. I am not alone. And then on the flip side is, wow, how that person has it, I never did. How that person sees it, I never have. How that person constructs the logic of their worldview, that's really interesting. I need to account for that in how I see the world, in how I think about things. So, why do we read aloud? Not to learn about adverbs, to become human. We were talking a little bit about AI earlier today. Ezra Klein, who I think is one of the great thinkers of our time, he's only 41. I'm so impressed with his mind. He said this morning on his New York Times op ed Instagram account that he thought that AI was going to help us the way knowledge was imparted in the movie The Matrix, like downloaded into our brains. But he's come to realize that actually the patient reading over time of many hours is what leads to the deepest education, because we are grappling with story and ideas over time. We're learning to live with them, to have them be a part of who we actually are. This is not about reading the classics so I can get into college. Why do we read the classics? Why do colleges want us to have a liberal arts education? It's not so that we get a job. Jobs are the fruit of being a well-rounded, deeply enriched human being who has capacities to make judgments, not just to jump through hoops and get the right grades, for God's sake. We are losing that tradition right now. The reason reading matters is that it allows you to discover more of our shared humanity. And this journey of this exchange of writing and reading and writing and reading has been going on since 57,000 years ago on the cave walls of Lascaux, France. Human beings have craved the ability to externalize the rich inner life and have someone else look at it, receive it, and accept it, understand it, hear it. This is the gift you're giving your kids when you jot down their words for them. This is the gift you're giving them when you teach them to write. They get to feel less alone because they linger long enough with their depth of experience to name it. And when we name something, we develop intimacy. And intimacy is the inner longing of all human beings. That's what we want. It's why we love our pets. There's a kind of exchange that feels intimate and uncomplicated. With humans, it's more complicated. So, one of the ways we detangle the complications is to name what's going on more honestly and more accurately. And that's what writing helps with. So, and reading. So, let me read you a little bit of what I wrote. Emily's writing, for me, was rich with metaphor, deeply textured with patient observation, the details of our direct experience. She names them, gives them time and breadth and depth. She discloses and unearths and excavates. Who else does that? E.M. Forster, Jane Austen, all the people you love to read, right? And because we linger with the writer, we get to know ourselves and our own experiences in new ways. We get to appreciate them as much as anything. Just like, yeah, that is how it feels to have a new baby. That is what it's like to fall in love. That is what it's like to feel betrayed. Don't we love that? And this is exactly why we read to children. It's not enough that we shout commands or explain proper etiquette to our kids to help them form values. It's not enough to tell kids what your values are. Telling never accomplished its mission. We can't assume that they are going to gather all they need to form their moral imaginations simply through explicit instruction. We don't just say, share your toys, and suddenly they value sharing. Where does it come from? This inward impulse to be a decent human being. We sense things. We wonder about fairness and justice. We ask questions to ourselves that no one else ever hears voiced. I want you to realize that there is this huge part of your children you do not know and have zero access to. They are thinking thoughts you don't know about. They're having questions you will never hear. They are forming their own values, and sometimes they can't even articulate what they are. It's just like a hunch. It's a sense. You see it acted out. You don't even know why they're acting out that way. And so human beings go in search of a mirror, someone who can show us ourselves so we feel less alone and awkward in the world. And then we go in search of a roadmap, a way to move through this world so that we can avoid pitfalls, mistakes, and tragedy, but we can also come to our lives with more character or greater wisdom and savvy, or maybe even more tenderness or resolve. These are the things we search for. This is why we watch television, movies, read books, listen to fairy tales, go to religious services. We are looking for insight beyond our limits to guide us, our higher power. Stories are the bedrock of forming who we are, and those stories absolutely matter. Here's the thing. We talk so much about what we should limit. We're so worried right now. Too much TV, too many video games. Should they have a cell phone? What about social media? What about TikTok? We're over here like creating this enormously restricted diet. It's like we've put them on a liquid diet to avoid the pitfalls of sugar and fat, right? We're like, okay, we'll just drink a liquid diet. But we are spending so much time curating a flavorless diet of restrictions. We forget that actually the antidote is a feast of ideas and stories. If we want our kids off the computers, away from the cell phones, away from the drama of the stories they find inside social media, we need to read to them. This is why we read. So their minds are full of other things. We have within our homes the power to shape the music of language, to create the cadences of literature that will be forever companions. And by the way, some of the quotes you read to your children will last in their minds forever. I wanted to share with you some lines from my childhood that I still think about from books that my mother read to me. The first one is a closing line from Charlotte the Spider in Charlotte's Web. It's by Wilbur about Charlotte, okay? He is describing who Charlotte was to him in his life after she sacrificed hers on his behalf. Here's what Wilbur says: "It is not often that someone comes along who is a true friend and a good writer. Charlotte was both." Oh my gosh. Stop. I'm so emotional today. Whew. One of the best lines of all time. And the first time I read it, I sobbed when I read it to my kids. And Johanna didn't understand it. She was 9. She got to college and wrote an entire poem about homeschooling and mentioned that she finally understood why I cried. Think about how long that arc is. From 9 to 18, her brain at various intervals is referring back to a moment when I was moved to tears reading to my children. This is why we read aloud. Here's another one that I wish I had taken a little more seriously in my own adult life. Laura Ingalls Wilder's response to Almanzo's inadequate proposal in These Happy Golden Years. Almanzo asks Laura what she would think about a proposal at one point in the story. And Laura replies, "Well, it depends on who asks me." Of course, knowing full well he meant himself. And he says back, "Well, what if I ask?" And she replies, "Depends on the ring." I'm telling you, I should have told my then fiance, "Depends on the ring." That would have been a good move. He did not propose with a ring. But what a great moment. And I remember reading it aloud to my kids when they were being homeschooled and having this like thrill of memory and realizing like these are lessons you actually want your kids to take away, right? Like to have standards, to say what they really feel and mean, to not be codependent, for heaven's sakes. Okay, how about this one from Anne of Green Gables? And I realize these are all coming from, kind of girl-centric books, but I was a girl. These are the books I read. When Anne says, "I'm so glad I live in a world where there are Octobers." Recently, one of my friends, we're in our 60s, she said to me, "Does it ever get to you when you realize you might only have 10 or 15 Octobers left?" Sobs. And I thought back to Anne. And I thought how amazing it is that I've always known that Octobers mattered because of her. How about this one? I love this quote of hers as well. "Kindred spirits are not so scarce as I used to think. It's splendid to find out that there are so many of them in the world." And when you feel the most alone, to know that you could find a kindred spirit, to say this to a child who's homeschooled, who's feeling a little out of the loop, to talk about a kindred spirit with your child who's socially awkward, so important. Stories allow us to triangle in another perspective and to talk about it in a 3-way conversation. So it's not just you telling your kids, "You'll be fine. You're not weird. It's okay. We'll find you a friend. I'll work harder." We don't need to do that. They can find friends in books. We can have these conversations. We can be honest. Sometimes I remember feeling awkward and left out and mistreated by people. And I even went to school. It's not because you're homeschooled. And look, Anne is reminding us to look for kindred spirits. Let's do that, like that. And because I want to include a quote from a modern book, this one is just a book that I think a lot of you have read with your kids. The warning from Lemony Snicket: trouble and strife can cover this world like the dark of night or like smoke from a suspicious fire. This is a troubling quote. This is one that leaves you a little uncomfortable. But you know, when you're going through hard times, knowing that that isn't an uncommon experience helps you survive it. So, reading with our kids is an opportunity to pay attention to people like Emily Henry, who have patiently observed this world and put it into language so that we can have that cathartic response. This is why writers are valuable. It's why they will outlive everything, because writers are the kind of people who linger with their experience and then patiently seek to find language so that all of us can experience the exhale of relief. I am known, I am seen, I am held. That's why we read. That's why Dawn spends thousands of hours reading hundreds of books to narrow it down to 27 that we think will be good this year for you. Because we care about the content of those books. The stories they tell matter. I'm so freaking excited that we have Mark Twain's Prince and the Pauper this year. I think that's a must read for everybody. I think it's a storyline that must be understood in our culture. This idea of trading places with someone who has your opposite fortune is lacking in today's political imagination. So let's read a book that helps us do that, please. And to understand how language accomplishes this magical feat of making us feel seen and known and held, it is kind of fun to deconstruct it, to notice, oh, alliteration, sensory observation, opening hook, surprise, onomatopoeia, strategic use of adjectives, exclamations, succinct dialogue, reminiscing, foreshadowing, callbacks. These help you understand why the literature is powerful and how to do it in your own right, how to communicate in powerful ways. Whether humorous, heartwarming, or troubling, we read because education comes when we sit patiently with a story and collection of ideas over time. So if you want your kids to have a rich education, please give it to them in books with rich, open-ended conversations, lots of pauses for babies and boredom and teenagers rolling their eyes, because we're living a forward motion human experience. They're not going to come in all misty-eyed and ready to be moved to tears. They're not grown-ups with nostalgia. They're kids. They love Redwall. I used to joke, my kids loved Redwall. I found those books so boring. I mean, the first one I loved, but then it was like the same book over and over. I was like sorting my spice cabinet in my imagination while I'm reading this book. But they loved it. They loved the moral clarity of it, the sense of humor, the developed characters. These books are for them. They're also for you. It's okay if you get bored. It's okay if they occasionally get bored. This is all part of the deal. So how do we grapple with this read aloud context where I've put out this vision that feels high and lofty, and then, you know, starting August 15th when you start your homeschool, you're going to be like, none of my kids would settle down, and they kept poking each other, and the baby kept crying anytime I tried to breastfeed and read aloud. That used to happen to me. So what do? Well, first of all, you tell the truth. You describe what's happening out loud so everyone can hear it. You say things like, hey, we're trying to read aloud here. You all seem a bit antsy. What are we going to do about it? How can we help you be here now while I'm reading? And you problem solve as a team. Your job is not to solve your children's unhappiness. I don't know if anyone's told you that. That's not your job. Your job is to notice it. You problem solve together. So you don't have to anticipate it. You don't have to guess about it. You can be a normal human who asks normal questions. Hey, why aren't we listening? What's going on in here? Why is everybody so antsy? What can we do about it? Not stop poking your sister and why won't you sit down? And this book is really good and I need you to be quiet. That doesn't help. But naming it helps. Hey, this is our read aloud time. Do you need a snack? Should we get some new Lego? Who wants a puzzle? Would a puzzle be a good thing to work on today while we're reading aloud? Get your kids involved in solving the problem as opposed to you telling them how to solve the problem. Does that make sense? Secondly, you can read in shorter amounts of time, shorter chunks. One of my very favorite recommendations from Charlotte Mason is to keep short lessons. So we used to read aloud for about an hour each day. And here are the things we read. We started every day with a fable, an Aesop's fable, which was a single page in a beautiful book. So it was maybe 500 words, 300 words. So that's short. And once we read the fable, everybody kind of squirreled around and rearranged their bodies and dumped out some more loud Legos because it was only 300 words. And while we're doing that, we're talking about the fable, the moral of the story, the characters, whatever. Then I might read a poem. Then I might read the chapter from the fiction book. Sometimes it would be a whole chapter. Sometimes it would be 3 or 4 pages. Sometimes it might only be a paragraph because the baby is kicking and screaming and I can't calm her down. But at least each day, there was the attempt to get some of that momentum going. And there were some days where they didn't want to stop. You get to the end of the chapter and they're like, can we keep going? Those are magical days. Do they happen every day? No. But when they do, just roll with it. Skip math for the day and keep reading. We also tried to read a little bit of nonfiction each day in this 1 hour. And the nonfiction would be something like we're studying weather, we have a book from the library, and I would read a paragraph or 2 from that book. I wanted them to develop the cadence of what nonfiction sounds like when it's well written, so that when I ask them to write, which is usually nonfiction, they have just as much familiarity with how that sounds as they do with fiction. So in the course of a morning, we would read somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes from these various sources. And if you're a religious person, you can also read a little chunk from a religious text, if that's meaningful as well. We would pick a time of day, and for us, it was after breakfast. We would move into the family room, always. It's how we kicked off every homeschool day. I would sit in a rocking chair or on the couch. Sometimes I'd be reading and I literally could not keep my eyes open a moment longer. And I would look like this, literally. I'm reading aloud, and then I'd be like, okay, all right, I'll be with you in a minute. And I would fall asleep and just be lights out, for like 5 minutes to come back to life. That's okay. That's allowed. Oh, do you see that beautiful picture back there? That's a mother reading to her child given to me by my kids for Mother's Day one year, right? Reading aloud is a way of setting the thermostat for the day. You're absorbing good language. There's a coziness to it. There's a just listening. I don't have to perform or produce. Makes it so nice because then after you've read aloud for all that time, it's easier to go do copy work at the kitchen table. Some people read aloud. Some kids like read alouds at night. That's what someone said. And I get that. And if that's your time, then do it then. That's totally fine. There's no rules about this. Another thing I like to do with reading aloud is I will ask kids before we start, where did we leave off? I don't say, give me a narration. That's formal and bizarre. I say, where did we leave off? Who remembers where we just ended? And then I give opportunity for everyone to collaborate and bring us back up to speed. Mondays were harder than Fridays, than any other day because they had to remember back to Friday. So sometimes I help them out. It's not a test, it's collaboration. So if they can't remember, it's your job to model. It's your job to say, well, here's what I think happened. Does anyone remember what this character did or said? You can prime the pump. We give you a set of big, juicy questions in the dart, arrow, boomerang, and slingshot. These can be asked to help prompt that kind of discussion. And then when you're done with reading, you might say something like, what jumped out at you from what I read today? What part surprised you? Or of all the readings we did, which one are you still thinking about? Give them just an opportunity to put a little bow on it. Don't line them up in front of the fireplace and go down the line and say, narrate the last chapter. Maybe people have to do that in school. Don't do that at home. It will kill the energy and the vibe. Simply invite participation. And if you have a shy child, someone who doesn't like to speak up, maybe they're younger and they don't like speaking up when their older brother and sister dominate the space, look for a moment when it's just the two of you. Maybe they're peeling a carrot or you're rinsing cream rinse out of their hair in the tub. Ask them then for that one-on-one feedback. They don't have to perform. This is not a performance. This is not school. It is not graded. This is learning through conversation. It is the tutorial model. And that's what we're about in Brave Writer. And you will be stunned that when you talk like a normal human being, interested in literature, grammar, and the world, your kids are learning. They're learning more than if you crank through a workbook and take a quiz. It's how we make learning our own possession. It's how we become educated. Educated, not graded and tested, but truly with an ownership over the material so that when I'm talking about adjectives, I know what I mean, not trying to remember what I wrote on a test from 2 weeks ago. And then finally, you don't have to expect your kids to love every book. It's okay if they don't like a book. In fact, I have discovered that teens love not liking a book. Let them rip it a new one. If they're reading a book and they go all the way through it, you know, you can say, yeah, you can read to the end. Tell me everything wrong with this book. That is a great way to grow some critical thinking skills. Teens love to feel superior. So give them their head. Let them. Let them. And for your younger kids, you'll have a variety. One kid loves fantasy, another one doesn't. That's okay. Say to the one that doesn't, we're doing fantasy right now because Nellie loves it. Next month, we're going to do historical fiction because that's what you love. Like, treat them like they have the capacity to manage their dislike in service of somebody else or for the sake of expanding their palette. Catering, reducing friction, telling our children that they should never be uncomfortable does not create an education. I remember reading things like The Giver when I found it very difficult and unhappy to read, but I'm glad that I read it. And I think we need to help our children develop that capacity, but we do it gently and with compassion and a sense of humor, you know? Look, I know fantasy isn't your cup of tea. Meet me at the sink tonight when we're washing the dishes and let's just rip on it. Let's talk about all the lack of realism, okay? But we're going to keep reading it because, you know, Noah over here loves it like that. When I think about reading aloud, then, the reason I say that it changes everything is that we are actually building our homeschools on the foundation of literature as opposed to textbooks. What we're basically saying is this: books written by human beings who have patiently observed what it means to live in this complicated, bizarre experiment called planet Earth have gifted us with stories and ideas and exposition around our history, shared and not shared, so that we can become better, decent human beings and build a world worth living in. So we can make the judgment calls about AI, technology, moving to Mars, fighting wars, healing the globe. Who's going to make those decisions if not your children? How are they going to make them? What is going to inform their choices? We should not just be about restriction and protection. We've got to supply the nourishment that creates that in them. And we are the ones to build the appetite. Your own reading habits matter. In fact, in my original book, The Writer's Jungle, I had a whole chapter with a recommended reading list on it, which is now very out of date, for parents. I was like, look, if you're going to teach your kids to write, you should be reading. Here are some great books to read. Some of you have even said to me, I'm going to get all the Boomerang books and read them. Yeah, great plan. I don't even care what you read. Just read. Listen to audiobooks when you're, making dinner. Fill your own life with the joy and suffering of sharing that human condition with a writer, because it's going to change how you see everything, how you understand war and peacetime, struggle and abundance. All of that is going to mean something else to you when you enter somebody else's world. And that's what authors give us. So thank you for coming to this sort of impromptu webinar. We have 3 more this month of June. My hope is that you're joining us on the dart, the arrow, and the boomerang. I hope that if you have children who can't read, you are using this insanely gorgeous tapestry of picture books to teach them the foundations of literacy. My gosh, the number of magnificent books Dawn has picked for that program is breathtaking. You got to go look. We'll put a link here so that you can just page through them. Just go to your library website and just boom, 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 boom. Click them all. Have them hand them to you in a big batch. Carry them home so proudly in your arms. Put them in a basket. Page through them for yourself. Don't always think about your kids. Think about you. Nourish you. Read a picture book for you. Guess what happens? Pretty soon, little people are clamoring to get into your arms to see what the cool adult is doing. My kids became interested in Jane Austen because I got obsessed in my 40s. I had never read her. And this year, Dawn picked Northanger Abbey to be the last book of the Boomerang, and I just beamed. I was like, one of my happiest periods of my whole life was listening to that book on audiobook while I made dinner, crying. I was laughing so hard because she eviscerates the Gothic novel. She literally, if you know that trope at all, if you've read Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre or any of those, she goes in with a scalpel. And if you haven't read those books and you don't know what a Gothic novel is, and Northanger Abbey isn't making you laugh, guess what? You can fix that. You can go find out what's happening and grow as a human being and become an educated adult, which is my favorite kind. It's my very favorite kind. So go do it. We've got quills for your little guys. We've got darts, 8 to 10. We've got the arrow, 11, 12. We've got the boomerang, 13, 14. And of course, our endlessly beautiful collections for the slingshot level, contemporary and classic works of fiction for high school. And if you're in the Brave Writer training, we're going to do all this stuff together. You don't even have to go it alone. Dawn and I have some amazing ideas for the webinars coming up for your families that are going to help you make this journey together. And I'm here to support you the whole way. And so is Dawn. The training is only $20, by the way, in the month of June. It goes up to $30 starting in July, but there are only 500 seats. So get in, because at 500, we have to cut it off because that's the size of our Zoom webinars. So if you want to be in, now's a good time to sign up. Brave Writer Training is our program of webinars, office hours, and emails that support you using quill, dart, arrow, boomerang, slingshot, and anything else that you purchase from Brave Writer. And Dawn and I are the leaders of it. So the training is for all of you. And we would love to have you join us. We would love to have you join us. Cindy is my right-hand woman. She runs all the operations in the background. You will love her. You will get to know her. And Dawn, who you've been interacting with in chat, She is the one who picked all the books and supervises the production of all of our publications. You have no idea just how privileged we are to have someone of her skill set and caliber supervising and running our program. And then, of course, Melissa Wiley, who you all know from the podcast and her brilliant middle grade literature books, writes the darts. Like, are you kidding me? No AI insight. Love you all. Thank you for being here. We will upload this in replay. So if you want to watch it again or share it with friends, we'll send that out to you and you can share it. Should be on YouTube, but it will also be on our website. Okay, everybody. Have a great night.